don't use a microphone, I think I'm able to project. Can you hear me? Do I need this? Is this better? You like this? Okay. As I was, a few minutes ago, as I was warming up the crowd, I was doing a little warm up. I mentioned this is my lecture notes right here. Okay. So this is 10 years of teaching experience right here. You learn how to say very little, but with a lot of impact. I'm going to show you about an hour and 8 minutes worth of film footage. But before we begin, I just want to warn you that you're going to see the good, you're going to see the bad, and you're going to see ugly. So just be careful, especially if you have Latino, Latina, Chicano, Chicana, if you're a Chola, a Cholo, if you're we have all kinds of names, right? You know, a Vato, you know, a Bruca, you know, whatever you want to call yourself. You know, we have, that's what's so interesting about Chicano, Latino, however you want to, Hispanic, you know, whatever name you want to use. It's the whole group of peoples are very diverse. It's not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. And as Raylene mentioned earlier, I have a degree at UC Riverside. My BA degree is in fine art and also Chicano studies. And then from there, I went on to film school at UCLA. So what I want to do here is just real quick, just a little warm-up for you. I want to show you just like a 5-minute overview of about roughly the first 100 years of cinema. As you watch this, just see if you can notice what films, you know, a lot of you here are in your, what, early 20s, right? So what I'm going to show you, most of the films were, most of them were all produced probably when you were knee-high to a duck, right? Or not even a, you know, a blink, a twinkle, as they say, in somebody's eye yet. And so these, just an overview, just so you get a little warm-up here. Okay, so let's start here with this. It's about 100 years of cinema.
be there. Whether there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there.
What was missing from those pictures? Is this cinema? Now this is, it showed you over 330 movies were represented here. And you probably count on your hand, one hand, how many images of diverse. If I was an alien from another planet and I was sitting there, I wouldn't think there was African American or Asian or Latino or anything like that. Did you notice that? It was not very well represented. So that's where Professor Jacobo comes in and revises history. I'm not going to change it, but I'm just going to add here. I put together a little, that was 5 minutes, actually it was about 6 minutes. And I'm going to show you something here that represents 100 years of Latina imagery in cinema. Okay, and let me tell you, I made it short because it takes a long time to edit stuff. It's a minute and 30 seconds. Give you an overview of what was left out. Okay, what I just showed you was showed about 20 years ago at the Oscars that was televised on television. They showed this. This was 20 years ago. That's why I said most of the movies didn't even include the stuff from the last 20 years. But here I've included, if you'll notice, the last movie on this clip that I'm going to show you came out this past year. And the main actor was nominated for Academy Award. So watch. Bad, the Ugly, and then this last one. Anybody recognize the movie?
I can't remember the name, but it was very good.
Yeah, they're like, the original title was The Gardener. Is it called? Another movie about you know, Mike Gardner's Anglo, okay? I have an Anglo gardener, right? So they changed it to a Better Life, and the actor right there from Mexico plays the part of Carlos Galindo, and the actor is Damian Bashir. And Damian Bashir was nominated this past year, didn't win it, but you know, getting nominated from all the hundreds of movies that are released is quite extraordinary. What I wanted to then go into here, because it's not just a lecture, but it's interactive, so if you have a question, or I may pose you a question and ask you, just like right now, it's like, what did you see? Now, think about what were some of the positive images that you saw there? What were some of the negative images? What were some of the images that you would be proud of? What I'm going to show you here is a couple of clips. This one is from a movie, a documentary. I didn't produce it, but it's called The Bronze Cinema. And it gives you it's a little 3-minute clip here about the early history and participation of Latinos and Latinas in motion pictures. And then it's going to go into showing you the origins of the stereotype. Hollywood's first bad guy, the bad dude, was a Latino. And they changed, you know, today, you know, there's, you would say, well, there's not too much of that right now, but there's always somebody to take the place of the last one. But here are the origins.
In order to understand Hollywood's portrayal of Latinos, you have to understand the evolution of the industry itself.
Movie making was a wondrous new medium born with the new century. Its inventors were East Coast immigrants who came to Los Angeles for the good locations and the year-round sun. They came to a city that not only had a Spanish name, but had been part of Mexico only 60 years earlier.
I think over the long throw of the 100 years of Hollywood cinema, you've seen the Latino come and go. Mexicans showed up in movies from the very beginning. They were playing Indians and they were playing pirates, perhaps, and in many instances playing Mexicans. They were always around.
In the early 1900s, motion pictures told simple stories of good guys and bad guys. Some of the movie's first bad guys were called greasers, a dangerous people prone to violence and mayhem.
The term initially comes from the fact that Mexicans, by and large, worked on the shipyards in California loading hides onto boats and would get the tallow all over themselves and become greasy.
The figure of the greaser, the immoral lowlife who kidnapped white women and killed the bandolero, the bandit, the greaser. It was such a horrible depiction of Mexican nationals, but by depicting the Mexican national like that, they were really depicting every Latino.
Hollywood discovered a moneymaker. What more do you need? You've got a bad guy, he's dark, he's dumb, for the most part, he's violent, a rapist, you know, can't speak the language. All of that really works well with the needs of a compact screenplay.
And the bad girls in these early films were oftentimes Mexican women, portrayed with a violent nature and loose morals.
And there was terrible propaganda. And anything associated with Mexico was viewed to be as treacherous, evil, bloodthirsty.
We get a sense that obviously these were popular films. We also see that in the Spanish language newspapers in the Mexican-American community, that these films upset people, and there's a number of instances of people walking out of the theaters, editorialists getting boycotts started, of theater owners deciding not to show the films.
It was such a terrible stereotype that Latin American countries got together and said, we're going to boycott every single U.S. film that comes to our countries if you don't change this. And in fact, they did.
In 1922, the Mexican government announced a ban of any movie by any company who made an offending film. President Wilson himself felt it necessary to intervene by asking the Hollywood movie people to, quote, "Please be a little kinder to the Mexicans."
All right, there you go, in a nutshell. The next thing that I wanted to show you here, and this is the thing about history, and especially cinema, you have to understand, here in America, motion pictures were invented here. Thomas Alva Edison, who, if you read the research, was a Latino. Did you know that? No. Thomas Alva, and then he was adopted. He was born in Mexico City. He was known for his high IQ, and an American family adopted him, brought him to America, and the rest is history. So just remember that. When you watch a movie, it was invented by a Latino, Thomas Alva Edison. The industry began in 1895. Okay? From this day to back then, pretty much about 90% of the films that were produced were destroyed or lost. And a nice little gem came up 2 years ago, 2010. There were various companies across America, especially in Europe too as well. But here in America, there was a company called Vitagraph. And the Vitagraph company, it's known that about less than 15% of all the movies that they produced in the early era still survive. The rest have either decomposed, were destroyed, lost, and never to be found. This one film that I want to show you is a little bit different, just to show you that they weren't all negative. They were in the minority, but this movie is called The Better Man. The Better Man. Better meaning best. This was 1912, and the movie was discovered in New Zealand 2 years ago. It was in somebody's suitcase somewhere, and they go, this film was thought lost. And it's quite interesting because again, we're going to have a Latino being portrayed, and of course, he's portrayed as a bandit. But there's a little plot twist, a little Hitchcock thing going on in here. It's a silent film. It's about 10 minutes. If you've never seen a silent film, films were never silent. There was always either somebody playing the piano, a duet, a trio, a quartet, a quintet. Some movies, a 220-piece orchestra with a canon. And so movies were never silent. When they say silent, it just means that when people spoke, you didn't see a synchronization of the voice. You didn't hear a voice coming out. A lot of times, movies were shown, and if they had complicated plots, someone would stand off to the side like what I'm doing here, and as the movie is playing, and someone playing an organ, one of those big Wurlitzer organs or piano, whatever it is, then the person would help the audience. And so I'm going to let it play here, and I'll just interject just so you get, because the subtitles are very, if you have a phone right now or an iPad and you look down, you missed the plot. Because since there's no dialogue, you have to look very carefully. See, because cinema is all about showing. It's all about showing. I tell that to my screenwriting students. Don't tell us what they're doing. Show us what they're doing. So this 10 minutes, you have to pay real careful attention, and you want to look at the way people look, the little faces, just a little glare, a little, look like this or that says volumes. You know how it is when you have a fight with your girlfriend or boyfriend, and they give that. Women are really good. They give that the look of death. Right? They don't have to say anything, right? And guys are really good at going into a little cave. Like, right? So you have to look very carefully. So as you watch this, it's called The Better Man. It's quite interesting. That's all I'll say right now. Let's play. those days here, kids come down with all kinds of diseases. The notes, you don't have to put on, you don't have to put the light, I'll just talk over it. Kids in those days got what they call the croup. It's like a whooping cough kind of a thing. And so Dad right here is supposed to be out there getting the doctor. He decides, go to the damn thing home. And look around what you see there. Got a Native American right there. Meanwhile, back at the home, daughter here is getting worse and worse. It doesn't look like he's doing that well. Uh-oh, here we come. Miguel Gomez. The law hot on his trail. Hungry has been in days. Decides he's going to get something to eat. Notice the painting in the background is going to play a part in the plot here. I think if you read his lips, he goes, I ain't got no doctor here, or whatever. He probably doesn't even know the English too well. But watch what happens. This is where culture plays a part in the story. She's trying to communicate. She's going to go with a picture. See, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Who is that? What has the Madonna and child? This is the Virgin Mary and Jesus. And he doesn't sign it off. He's Catholic too. He might be a thief, but he's a Catholic. And then he's figuring it out. He goes, oh, I get it. All right, I'll go do it. And so he's going to go get the doctor. Meanwhile, the father right there is trying to get back into the game, but no good. Now remember when he first entered the saloon, there was this one poster here, a recent poster. Make some quick money right here. Dinkly, he sees Gomez. There he is. So Mr. Saunders is going to play here the bounty hunter. Part of the stereotype, you see Latinos carry knives. Mr. Saunders took a tumble, so now Mr. Gomez, he says, oh shoot, I got a horse here. So he's going to hobble. He's not going to steal it. He's only going to use it for transportation. Now this is totally different here. There's a little plot twist here. So now he's off to find the doctor. Meanwhile, Mr. Saunders here is licking his wounds. So you have to ask yourself then, who's the hero here? Is it Mr. Saunders or is it Mr. Gomez? Meanwhile, daughter's getting worse and worse by the minute. Look at her. How you're running a hot fever. Now these films back in the day were called two-reelers. These were the feature films of that day. Finds Dr. Roberts. Maybe a little chicken soup here. That's not working. Yeah, you can say, she's hot. You could read her lips. She's hot. Burning. Probably got 104. She says, where are they? There you are. Saunders is not going back to the gambling hall. He's going to head to the house. Doesn't have a horse. Gomez and the doctor got the horses and pretty much going to get there way before he does. Also, this is the days when doctors made house calls. The house call. Look at him, he's helping him with the medical supplies and all that. Wait a minute, he's supposed to be a thief. Watch what happens here. That's modern technology. There's the drugs. Give him drugs, you know. Uh-oh, he sees his horse. What's my horse doing here, he says. He says, well, let's check this out. And then watch. What? The guy just beat him up, or he's in the house. Now I got him. Now I got him. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to get him. Mom here really gets it to him. She tells him to leave. She says, get out, leave. You know? Mr. Gomez, you need help. Right now, Mr. Saunders feels like about 2 inches tall. Well, that's it's never been shown before. I just came across this several months ago. When I teach my courses in American cinema, one of the areas that I delve into is women's contribution. Don't worry, we're going to get there. The last video that I'm going to show is a woman, in my research, her name is Lupita Beltran. She was the first Latina, first woman producer in Hollywood during the early 50s when they used to do all the TV shows live. And when I was a student at UCLA, I was doing my research, and I found this woman. She was still alive, and I actually got to meet her, and she gave me permission to interview her. So the last one that I'm going to show you is a video that I produced. She has since, unfortunately, passed away, but at least I was able to document her contribution as a woman, as a Latina in television, live television back in the late 40s, early 1950s. This next movie is from a very famous comedian of that era. We're talking 1920s, and this one in particular is 1923. In the 1920s, we had 3 top comedians in the world. Of course, Charlie Chaplin was one of them. The other one was Buster Keaton. And the third one, he was dubbed as the third genius, Harold Lloyd. He was very studious looking, one of those little, spinning glasses, and lots of stuff happened around him. He was very acrobatic, as the others were. And this movie here, though, is a little bit different. Here in 1923, the story deals with the main character, Harold Lloyd, who he and his love interest are going to take a vacation, and they're going to go south. South America. Matter of fact, to a little island. And so I just showing you just selected clips of this movie. It's a feature. By 1923, the movies were over an hour. This is about 68 minutes, but I'm going to show you just a few minutes. And as you watch this, the difference in the portrayal of the Latinos and the Latinas, and you could probably make a list. See if you can make a list of all the negative stereotypes, and they're like over the top. I'm talking over. They're supposed to be funny. But when you look at it, it's pretty sad when you look at it. But this is the prevailing image of the Latina back in the 1920s, up until the 30s, 40s, and even in the 50s and 60s. This is called Why Worry? Just some selected clips. Again, it's a silent film. Videos or movies didn't have synchronized sound until 1927. Paradiso. Now watch the imagery here. He's been asleep a long time. Look at the burro. Here comes the star of the program here, Harold Lloyd. They exhausted all the stereotypes. Here comes a new one. Did you notice how many did anybody keep count? Both men and women. The women very submissive. Just standing in the sidelines, looking pretty, always wanting to dance, right? Right. Now, it was never up until the late 20s, and then going into the 1930s. Now we're in the sound era. We have two individuals. Now this is what I'm telling you and what I'm presenting today. I cannot show you everything. This is like a 10-week class minimum, 17 if you're a community college. So I'm just showing you a broad overview. One, they mentioned earlier, Rita Hayworth. You'll find out that wasn't her real name. And then the other person, Anthony Quinn. And Anthony Quinn had the honor, the dubious honor, if you want to call it that, of playing not only Mexicans, Mexican Americans, although he being part Irish, Mexican American, was born in Mexico, as far as, that's right, you know that one. And Rita Hayworth, also a Latina. So we're going to take a look real quick here, a little profile on Rita Hayworth. And so we get to see that Hollywood began to notice that these individuals are bankable stars. That if we put them in a movie, producers say, if we put them in a movie, audiences, not just Latino audiences, but audience in general, will go and watch these films. And then we'll go with Anthony Quinn right after Rita Hayworth. Some of their contributions here to cinema.
In the golden age of cinema, Rita Hayworth epitomized Hollywood glamour like no other. She was the legend known as the Love Goddess. But her rise to stardom was a long journey. She began her Hollywood career as Margarita Consino, her real name, appearing in 10 small films before changing her name to Rita Hayworth.
People used to say, oh, Rita wasn't that good looking until they changed her hair. And then I went into the books and I would look and see Rita when she was really super young, just a teenager with the dark, dark hair. And she was gorgeous. I mean, she was every bit as gorgeous. She was just different. She looked more ethnic.
After appearing in some 31 feature films, Rita Hayworth finally got her break into international stardom with a standout performance in the star-studded film Blood and Sand.
Rita Hayworth as Doña Sol, alluring adventuress, woman of the world with an irresistible fascination.
If this is Destiny Afternoon, she
is death in the evening.
But Rita's most memorable role by far is that of screen siren Hilda.
What did you say to him?
I just told him you man answers hanger. Didn't hear about me, Gabe. If I'd been a ranch, they would have named me the bar nothing.
There never was a woman like Gilda, or a picture like Gilda. Columbia's outstanding screen triumph, starring Rita Hayworth with Glenn Ford.
That's what I told Val, and that's what you're going to tell him.
Making me deceive my husband.
I got some news for you, Gilda. He didn't just buy something. He's in love with you.
One man bought Gilda, another hated her and hungered for her.
I hate you too, Johnny. I hate you so much. I think I'm going to die from it.
Gilda, inflaming men's hearts with a kiss or a song.
Love me forever and let forever begin tonight. Put the blame on me, boy. Put the blame on me. One night she started to shim and shake. That brought on the Frisco quake.
Make her stop. What do you mean by it?
Now they all know what I am. And that's what makes you happy, Johnny. It's no use just you knowing it, Johnny. Now they all know that the mighty Johnny Barrow got taken. And then he married him out.
Off-screen, Ms. Hayworth's personal life often made headline news. Her courtship and marriage to Prince Ali Khan made her the most publicized woman in America. In 1949, the world watched newsreels of the royal wedding, her third marriage, and her daughter Yasmin was born soon thereafter. Sadly, the marriage ended after a bitter court battle, after only 2 years. But by 1953, Rita returned to the screen to deliver what many critics said was her best singing, dancing, and acting performance to date, as the provocative and sultry Miss Sadie Thompson.
The roads that haven't been sown, they might start a chain reaction, and I might explode. The heat is on, the heat is on. You're gonna hear the sirens howl tonight. You're gonna see the building bounce, because a lady's on the prowl tonight, and it behooves me to announce the heat is on.
Carry on your trade.
What? How could I marry you? When I think of all the guys that I've hang on. Get out of here! Out of here! Get out!
Regardless of all the rain and mud, the feel of the place gets in your blood. But deep in the night there comes unawares the terrible thought that nobody cares. You're back with the blues again. To be even more specific, you've got what they call the blue Pacific blues. Don't come near me.
Co-star and Academy Award winner Jose Ferrer said, "When Rita is called before the camera, she illuminates the whole scene. she carries the picture. Though critically acclaimed and a source of professional pride for Mrs. Hayworth, Miss Sadie Thompson was not a huge box office success.
I did a picture with her, but I didn't think of a scene with her. It's called A Money Trap with Glenn Ford. But I got to know it on the set, and she made a line for me, and she got my hand. And she almost made my hand bleed. She was so scared. She said, what do I do? What do I? I said, well, you don't have to do anything. Just look very, just relax. She was shaking. People thought that she was drunk. When she was suffering from Alzheimer's. She was a very, very sweet person. I felt very sorry for her. Rita, yes, she was a tragic girl, and so attractive, and she was wonderful, really. She was a big star.
Rita Hayworth became the object of unkind gossip and bad press when her behavior became somewhat erratic and her memory began to falter. After 5 marriages, a movie career spanning some 37 years, and a long battle with what we now know as Alzheimer's disease, Rita Hayworth died in her daughter Yasmin's New York apartment in 1987 at the age of 68. The New York Times obituary aptly read, "She was the epitome of Hollywood glamour and allure, a stunningly beautiful actress and dancer." Intensity and magic that was larger than life. Throughout his movie career, Quinn convincingly portrayed a wide range of nationalities. Resisting categorization, he once told an interviewer, "Acting is my nationality." The Mexican-Irish actor was born Anthony Rudolph Oaxaca Quinn in Chihuahua, Mexico in 1915. Multi-talented from the start, Quinn dabbled in music as a young man living in Los Angeles. Later in life, he became an accomplished visual artist. Well known for his colorful and eclectic personality, few know that the actor was at one time a professional boxer with 16 consecutive victories under his belt. Quinn's movie career began in 1936, but it wasn't until the early 50s that he got his breakthrough role to stardom in Viva Zapata and an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor.
Did you take the land away from these people? Took their money. I took their wives too.
Huerta's forces are coming through the passing now. I give you my word. I will stop the troops.
I hope so, but if you can't, I will.
And just 4 years later, Quinn would take home a second Oscar as Best Supporting Actor for his role as the painter Gauguin in Lust for Life.
Why don't you shut up? If you have to slobber, don't do it over me. When have you got a stroke of manual labor in your life? Well, I have. I've done ditches in the stinking heat of the tropics. I went to the docks and weathered so cold my hands froze to the ropes. And I can tell you there's nothing noble or beautiful about it. I did it so I could go on painting. I didn't have a brother to support me.
By the early 60s, he had achieved international stardom.
Anthony Quinn as Alda Abu Taib. I carry 23 great wounds, all got in battle. 75 men have I killed with my own hands in battle. I scatter and burn my enemies' tents. I take away their flocks and herds. The Turks pay me a golden treasure, yet I am poor, because I am a river to my people.
But Quinn's immortal character portrayal was that of the exuberant and lusty Greek peasant Zorba.
You are in paradise.
Yet there is no better word for Anthony Quinn, voted Best Actor of the Year by the National Board of Review, for the role he was born to play. Zorba the Greek.
Remember this. If a woman sleeps alone, it puts a shame on all men. God has a very big heart. But there is one sin he will not forgive. If a woman calls a man to her bed and he will not go.
Everything about the film and the man is different. When Zorba talks, you listen.
I've done things to my country that would make your hair stand. I have killed, burned villages, raped women.
When Zorba drinks, you taste it. When Zorba loves, you feel it. Because this is a man who devours life as if it were a feast. A man who never puts off till tomorrow what he can enjoy today. Here is his world. Sea bathed, sun-washed Greece. Its sights, its sounds, its music, its dancing. Above all, here are its people. As proud as the silent village beauty whose desires only Zorba understood.
They hate it because they cannot have her. Only one man here can. You.
The vulnerable English youth whom Zorba sent stumbling into love. The Rabelaisian French madame who was loved by no less than 4 admirals. People as proud, as cruel, as revengeful, as murderous. There's their barren, mountainous homeland.
You bastard mountain! I eat your guts!
And overshadowing them all, Zorba fighting for life, laughing at death, attaining his place among the immortal characters of our time.
This time, his unforgettable role as Zorba won him an Academy Award nomination as Best Actor. Anthony Quinn's impressive career spanned over 60 years, garnered him 2 Academy Awards, and created a screen legacy that lives on in the hearts and minds of millions of movie fans throughout the world.
Rita Hayworth, Anthony, and there's others. I mean, they interviewed Ricardo Montalban. There was Gilbert Roland, and just tons of others. Just I can't do it in an hour and a half. This last selection I wanted to leave you with here is something that is rarely seen, because the only way you're going to be able to see it is through me. Okay, I was the last person to film Lupita Beltran, who I mentioned earlier. And the other thing I didn't finish my thought, that when I teach American cinema, there's another woman. A lot of people think that Thomas Edison and D.W. Griffith and all these other early filmmakers, it was a, like that James Brown song, it's a man's world. But there was another woman by the name of Alice Guy Blaché, who, when she came from France, she was the first woman to have a movie studio. It was called, you can do the research, it's called the Solax Company. And she was responsible for producing over 300 films. And when she died in 1968, most of her films were lost. But in the last 5 years, about 25, 30 films have been rediscovered and stuff. And that's another topic for another day. But going back to the whole idea of the Latina, I wanted to share with you Lupita. Before she passed away, I was able to videotape 2 or 3 hours of her describing a lot of her experience working in Hollywood, not only in television, but also in minor roles in Hollywood films. But she's most noted for her work in television. So I'm going to let her tell you all her escapades and working in television in Los Angeles. during the silent, not the silent era, but the live television era of the late 40s, early 50s. Cue it up here.
Por las noches me pregunto si en verdad cobarde soy y completamente sola me agarra tierra y error. Cobarde porque una vez por alguien sé que lloré.
A lot of people have asked me, were you the first woman producer of Latin musicals? And I said, no, I was the first woman producer on television. English or Spanish, Chicana, whatever, but I was the first one. And you know, a lot of people laugh and I tell them, and I have a world title, because I was the first woman producer of Latin musicals or television in the world. But you know why? A lot of countries didn't have television at the time. So you see, I conquered a lot of countries because they didn't have television. So you see, that's why I have my world's title. But no, I was the first woman producer. I had all kinds of personalities appear on my show. In fact, not long ago, a very dear friend of mine, he used to announce the fights, Jimmy Lennon. He was on my show, and I had him on my show because he had the most beautiful voice. He sang semi-opera. And his diction and pronunciation in Spanish was fantastic. If you remember how he used to say Los Angeles, you know, when he was in the fighting arena. And I had several different personalities that appeared on my show. I knew a lot of them when they were young. This is Ricardo Montalban. He sure looks a lot different, than the way his hair is now. Look at all. That was in the early 50s. And I will tell you that to me, as an actor, he's the best. That's Pérez Prado, the king of the mambo. You know, they've been coming out with kings of the mambo thing, but there was only one. And I crowned him the king of the mambo at the Hollywood Palladium in the early 50s. And we wanted a picture taken for the press, you know. So the photographer, he kept trying to get my face and get him, and he was a very short person. And finally they saw a box, and he stood on top of the box, and then we became the same size. So to him, when that picture came on, he says, look, Lupita Beltran is such a tall person, but not taller than I am. Look, we're the same size. But so that picture, it became kind of a joke and kind of a beautiful thing. But it was his favorite picture because he looked nice and tall, you know. And this picture with Lalo Guerrero, you see, Lalo Guerrero was from the beginning my right hand. I mean, without him, I've done everything that I have done on television and radio musicals. It's always been, Lalo's always been there with me. More so when we first started, because we had so much problems with music lyrics. But I didn't worry because I had Lalo Guerrero, a composer. We didn't worry about the songs that were sung and played, because Lalo was a composer, and that's what you usually had to have music clearance from. And of course, Lalo Guerrero is the first Chicano, the first man to sing in a Latin musical all over the world. He's number one. And he has been with me all these years. The first woman singer on television also was Aura San Juan. She is Olga San Juan's sister, you know, it's Olga San Juan. A lot of people have seen her on television in different movies. And one day she called and she was very sick and wasn't going to be able to make it to the show. So my manager says, what are you going to do with those 10 minutes? I said, don't worry about it, I'll sing. And as I said, I sing, Lala turned and said, what did you say? I said, I'm going to sing. You are? She said, yeah. And of course nobody argued with me, it was my show, you know, and I just decided, hey, you know, see what happens. So I'm telling you, I sang 2 songs and talk about nervous and talk about, at the same time, excited, because in the middle of my second song, everybody was hollering and everybody was making a big deal out of it. And that's all it took, because from there on they hadn't kept me quiet. The reason why I recorded and I made records was because people would ask me for records. And I used to sell my records. Although I was never trained as a singer, I'm not a singer, but I love to sing.
Qué bonito amor, qué bonito cielo, qué bonita luna, qué bonito sol, qué bonito amor.
I had 2 jobs. I used to work for U.S. Rubber from midnight to 6 in the morning. And then at 9 o'clock to 5, I worked in an office as a secretary. Then I was promoted because I spoke Spanish to hire salesmen, Spanish speaking. And then they asked me to do some commercials on radio about this company. So I started doing the commercials, and then they asked me to go and do it live from this nightclub where Lalo Guerrero was playing. They used to have a remote, a live radio show, and to do the commercials live. And one day the MC of that musical didn't arrive, so the owner told me to do it. So I did the radio show, and then people started calling, and that they liked the way I announced, and they liked the lady that was on radio. So then the owner asked me to continue. And then one day, this very tall cowboy western man, his name was Sandy Young, he owned a car lot. He was there after my radio show, and he told me, I've been listening to your voice on radio. How would you like to MC a television show? Oh, big deal, boy. I thought that was the most exciting thing. I said, what do I do? The same thing you do here. You introduce the artist, and I started singing. I'm not a singer. Up to now, I'm not a singer. So he asked me if I would MC a show, and that's how I started in television. I started doing the same thing from the radio musical, and this was Channel 11. And I took Lalo Guerrero with me in the orchestra, and the same artist that we had there on the radio show, and then we were on television. That's when we were on a show called Sandy's Hayride. All country western, and the little burrito was the last one with a Mexican show. And that's I never thought of television, or I never thought of being on radio. It just happened. But then the producer would tell us, we don't want you to do it this way, and we don't want you to do it that way. And of course he didn't speak Spanish, and he didn't know nothing about Mexican shows. And they weren't coming like they should. And it was in Spanish, but then Lalo Guerrero kept telling people, we'll see you at the Paramount, and we'll see you at the Paramount. But it was a ballroom where we both worked in East Los Angeles. Well, there at the studio, they thought it was Paramount Studios. So they told us no more strictly Spanish. From now on, one word in Spanish and one in English and one in Spanish. Hey, can you imagine doing a 1-hour show, saying buenos dias, good morning, ¿cómo están, how are you? I mean, it was ridiculous. So we moved to another channel, Channel 13, where we were allowed to speak whatever. But then I wanted to become a producer. It was exciting. I wanted, everything about lighting and sound and camera angles, and to produce my own Latin musical. So I started going to school, because remember, it takes school for everything. Without school, forget it. But when you set yourself a goal, stick to it. And if you stick to it, you will get there. Maybe halfway or whatever, but you never know. But stick to a goal once you have it in your mind. I went 4 times before this panel to become a producer. Oral, screening, and all questions of every kind. And 4 times I failed. It was something like the attorneys now, they go and take the test and they work a few months before they find out if they pass or not. Well, I failed 4 different times. On the 4th time I was coming down in the elevator, and one of the ladies in the panel, she told me, why don't you give up? You'll never make it. I said, why? Because you're a woman and you're a Mexican. You know, that woman, she touched 2 very sacred things of mine. And I said, now more so I'm going to show them. Maybe I'm a Mexican American, maybe I'm a woman, but so nobody's tried. There's no other woman producer. But I'm going to make it. So I continued going to school. I used to fall asleep with the books because I worked the day in and went to school and studied. On the 5th time, by then I had a manager and my sponsor, because I had one sponsor for 18 years. He spent money on my shows because, well, it was the only Latin show, the only Mexican show. And there was no other. And so they went with me. And do you know, I passed. And like I say, that time, the bond for a producer was $5,000. Not mine. Mine was $20,000. Where would I get $20,000? I used to make $250 a show, and I thought that was tremendous, you know, that was a lot of money. And so, I have never lied to accomplish anything in my life, and nobody should. If you can make it on your own, don't lie, don't make up stories. But I did say one lie during my career. I went to Channel 11, because by then I was in Channel 13. And I asked the manager there that if he could help me with half of my bond, that KCOP was going to put the other half. And he said, why? It's only $5,000. No, mine is 20. 20? I said, yes. Okay, we'll help you with half. Of course, they don't put the money, just, you know, their signature, and that's it. So then I went to Channel 13, and I asked them. And I told him then I wasn't lying. The Channel 11 was going to put half of my bond. And the manager told me, no, we can't help you. I said, well, thank you. And as I was walking away, he says, come back here, I'm not done with you. I said, we can help you with half. We're going to help you with all your bond. You're with us now, and we'll help you with all our bond. And it was so thrilling. And you know who that gentleman was? God rest his soul. It was Bing Crosby. He signed for for all my bond, which eventually that bond ended, and then I got my own. But like I say, don't ever exaggerate or lie to accomplish anything in life. At this time, I felt bad after. And do you know what I did? I went back to Channel 11 and I told them the truth. I told them I had lied about it, not knowing that the Channel 13 was going to help me with all my bond. And he says, don't worry, he says, you have to try. When you want to be somebody or someone, it's not easy. But as a woman, I praise you, because you're doing something that no other woman has done, and you have accomplished something that is rare, because in this field, a woman has no merits, a woman has no position, a woman has no advantages. It takes years, and it takes struggle, and it takes time, But if you really want something, I don't care where you come from, who you are, you can become whatever you want.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for coming and sitting there and watching and listening. And I think we have just a few minutes here. If anybody has any questions and answers, hopefully you ask the questions and I'll try to answer them. Do we have a few minutes? We got about 10 minutes. Anybody have any questions? I mentioned to you before, just a few years, just a couple years after I filmed her and edited this, I had the opportunity of going back to my alma mater at UCLA and organized a tribute to Lupita Beltran. And she was given an award for her work in television, in live television. Back in those days, they didn't even have reporters. So the only people that actually recorded was like Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. That's another story. They didn't film their TV shows on video. They actually used movie cameras, and they used movie camera with film, and then the film was edited. So even to this day, when you watch a DVD or even a TV show, it's very clear and crisp. And Desi Arnaz invented that three-camera movie motion picture filming for live studio. But for the most part, if you were low budget, like Lupita Beltran, she mentioned she made $250 a show, and she thought she was like, rich. And so, that I know of, none of her shows exist, but there were some, like for example, Jackie Gleason with his Honeymooner show. They recorded, what they would do is they would take a movie camera, and as the show was playing back live, they would film the television screen. And they call those kinescopes. So I have an eye out, and maybe this and they're on 16 millimeter. Have you ever seen some of the original Honeymooners? They look kind of like really contrasty and kind of a little fuzzy. It's because they were shooting off they were filming the TV screen with a movie camera in synchronization. Those are called kinescopes. So I don't know if those exist or not, but at least we have her words and her documentation and the photos that were used throughout the interview. Anybody? Any questions? Hopefully you learned that being a Latino, being a Latina doesn't mean being a stereotype. It's if you saw some of the heroes, Rita Hayworth, as I say, there were many others today. I could do a whole class on this, and it's for Anthony Quinn, one of the early pioneers of cinematic portrayals. And also, if you look at some of the other groups, Asian, we have Asian stars also, we have African American, and all other groups that, what I tell students is that if anything, when you watch movies and then you watch things with an open eye, that really, when you really come down to it, bottom line is that we as human beings, we have much more in common. I mean, you saw Rita Hayworth transcend her Mexican background. Anthony Quinn is playing a Greek. Why, he's even playing an Arab, in this Lawrence of Arabia. That it's not so much about where you come from, what your color is, what your culture, but really when you come down to it, we have more in common as human beings than we have differences. It just, for some weird reason, some of us focus on those little tiny differences. Oh, you eat that funny food, you speak funny, you wear funny looking clothes, or your hair looks weird, or something like that. But in fact, when you really come down to look at it, we have more in common as human beings than differences. And then that hopefully that we celebrate not the little minor differences, but we celebrate what we have in common. That we have a zest for life, that all of you that are in education, if you follow your, like Lupita says, if you have a goal, set it and follow it through. Have that mindset, have that growth and that hope mindset that eventually, she did it at a time when, before even civil rights. She was way before her time. And she told you, they told her, why don't you give up? You're not going to do it, you're a woman, and you're Mexican. But she took that to heart. So it was two very sacred things. Any questions? Comments? Yes. On the television, not that I'm aware of. Like I said before, if they were recorded, I asked her about that, and she vaguely remembered that they did kinescopes because the owner of the show, Sandy Young, who had car dealers and stuff like that, they would keep them, but we don't know what happened to them. They're probably in some suitcase and buried in somebody's cellar, who knows. But eventually things are coming out every year. Just recently, last year, they found the missing 20 minutes of a classic Metropolis German film. They actually found it in Argentina. Found it in an old hotel that we're going to demolish. The missing 20 minutes. Now it just released this past year. And in the movie that won Academy Award, The Artist, was a silent film. Isn't that interesting? Any other comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
What's very amazing obviously you spend a lot of time doing editing, trying to really kind of synthesis all the film the past 100 years, and also that, and now re-editing, filming interviews, and then when you talk about Rita Hayworth, and I was very surprised because I always think of them quote-unquote being white, or Latino, Latina, and so besides studying the quantification, and I have seen a lot of artists, right, in the old musicians too, so for them to quote-unquote have crossed over skills into these, they certainly have this path for quote-unquote being white. And it could be a good thing, like you say, you and me, we have more comments, but also certain that it also is for them to erase some of their past and identity as imposters. And as a film producer, right, how do you feel about that this is what it takes for Latino and Latinas to really have a crossover skill, bring to mainstream that make that more wider, that it's tangled, that it could be more finished?
I think what the answer to that is when you look at Hollywood productions, whether it be television or movies, is that it's always going to start with somebody that has the script. And then once the script or the screenplay is written, whether it's a TV show or a movie, then a producer will come along and then begin hiring who's going to play this part, who's going to play the part of this character, who's going to play the part of that character, who's going to be the hero, who's going to be the villain. And then the actors come along and then they have to make the decision, do I want to play a villain and have that stigma attached? And so there's this whole synergy that occurs, and most of it starts with the producer. And that's the thing, is that we need more women producers. We need more people of color, different cultures producers. When producing remains the majority of Caucasian males, then you'll understand why some of the stigma has not gone away. But for example, take a look at me. I don't look like I'm from Germany. I don't have blue eyes and blonde hair. But what I just showed you in the past hour and a half is quite revealing. It's nothing somebody else couldn't come along. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody else, but what's to prevent somebody that's from a different culture and doing the same research? And what's presenting it is the mindset. See, so if we have producers and directors and writers that have closed mindsets, and they don't look at the big picture, but it's not so much of you being an Asian or African American or a woman or Latino. That's beside the point. It's the story. What stories and we need tons of stories that have yet to be told. Can you imagine, would you go watch a movie if somebody played, let's say, Salma Hayek played Lupita Beltran, from her early years? Would you go see it? Yeah. I mean, see, there you go. There's a market right there. There's a market right there, but see, it's not going to get done unless somebody like me, whose Latino background, is going to go ahead and produce it, and get the funding together and do all that kind of stuff. If you wait, you could be like that picture of the one guy with the cobwebs, Yes. Sonia Braga, yes.
And so many of these films were adaptations, screenplays of novels that were
Right. Yes.
inspired.
Kisses by Women, and then the other one too was with Sonia Braga was El Gringo.
Right. And so, do you think that the films that are being made all have political facts, specifically to Latin America, not to the United States?
It all depends, because if you're looking at someone who was born and raised in America, for example, take the work of Robert Rodriguez. Robert Rodriguez came on the scene 20 years ago with El Mariachi. And bringing back those old stereotypes and just like revamping it, you know. And so today you see his movies, you know, his last one was Machete, you know, where you have this guy that's running around cutting up people, right? You know, and he serves that market, but it's a very tiny market. And then somebody else will come along, you know, Salma Hayek will come along and produce Frida. You know, have you ever heard of Salma Hayek's story? They told her the same thing that they told Lupita. They told her, what are you doing? Give up, you'll never, the only role you'll ever play is a maid or a whore. That's it. And again, those two sacred things that touched Salma Hayek's heart. And look at her. And it was Robert Rodriguez who cast her in a Showtime movie about 15, 20 years ago. What was the name of it? It was called, it had to be the 1950s. The road something. And that was her first screen role, and directors and producers said, what was that? Well, that was Salma Hayek, you know. So, Salma who? Salma Hayek. Well, let's get her, and the rest is history. And look at the rest of the other actors, both male and female. I don't like to say actress. I tell students, we say director, but we never say directoress. So we should say actors, not say actress. Yes.
I just want to congratulate you for the wonderful work you're doing. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoy this presentation, but especially I love that each of you, this is an example. Touch me. Even more good.
Thank you. That's what it's supposed to do. That's what it's all about. Thank you. Yes.
I really like to comment earlier about the work that Anthony Quinn, how they sort of had to come over into more American white culture
Right.
to fit in. And I noticed that when they were talking about the fact that she had been in films before she
Yes.
was her character.
Yes, exactly.
And she wasn't paid attention to it. It was when she started passing as white that she started to improve her. So
Yeah.
he thinks that despite the fact that he still see that sort of negative twist on the Latino culture being integrated into white culture, do you think that was the beginning of maybe more awareness through?
Yes, it's got to start somewhere. And so these are the early pioneers that I hopefully showed you just briefly, just in a nutshell. I mean, there's much more. If you actually read the story of Anthony Quinn, he wrote a book called The Last Tango. And in that book, he tells you there was like 5-6 years where he couldn't even get a job in Hollywood. He went to Italy, and he started a movie called La Strada and became an international hit in Europe. And then he came back and he said, oh, hey, would you like to be in my movie? He's like, you know what I mean? So the whole idea is being persistent, not giving up, because there's going to be roadblocks that come up. There are going to be hurdles, doors are going to be closed, but figure a way to go around it, go underneath it, and somehow, some way, if you have your mindset, you'll achieve it.
What about now that there seems to be like a, I don't know, a stigma where you can't play roles and you can't be a Latina unless you look at it. Like,
Now it's reversed, huh?
now it's reversed.
Yeah.
Like Sofia Vergara, she used to be a natural blonde.
Right.
They had that whole controversy with the new Disney princess who was, I mean, if she's had the father who's like from the Netherlands and the mother from Spain, she's not going to start. But they had to get rid of her as a Latina because she didn't look ethnic.
So you said they. When you say they, you're talking about the producers. Always look back. Who's
Or the public.
well,
The
it's,
public is
the
very angry about it.
well, you know what? It remains to be seen. You know, we see experiments being made, and probably the final frontier, I remember when I was a student, the final frontier was cable TV. Today they're saying the internet. So there's lots of stuff on the internet that never show up on network television, will never be in a movie theater, but a lot of the cutting edge stuff that is transcending those kinds of hurdles and roadblocks and stigmas and, you know, that you can't play this because of that or that. I don't believe in any of that. I believe that if you're the producer, it starts with the producer. And then you put it out, and then you sell it, because there's going to be a market. There's always going to be a market. And they use that as an excuse. I think those are excuses. Good questions. All right. I think we're out of time. Thank you again for coming, and hopefully I'll come back again. And show you more stuff. There's much more stuff that I have.
Thank you so much for coming, and before you go, please give me your event survey. Thank you, or the students.